Or someone thinking about leaving Windows behind, this moment feels different. For years, Linux has lived in a strange space between passionate community project and quiet revolution. It powers servers, supercomputers, Android phones, embedded devices, and much of the modern internet, yet on the desktop it has always felt like the underdog. Friendly, powerful, customizable, yes, but fragmented, inconsistent, and sometimes intimidating for newcomers. Now Zorin OS is signaling that the era of almost ready might be over. The message is clear: Linux isn't just an alternative anymore. It's drawing boundaries, setting standards, and asking users to decide what kind of future they want. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what Zorin OS represents. Built on Ubuntu, designed in Ireland, and focused relentlessly on ease of use, Zorin OS has always positioned itself as the bridge between Windows and Linux. From the moment you boot it up, the interface feels familiar. Taskbar at the bottom, start menu-style launcher, clean icons, intuitive settings. It doesn't demand that you relearn everything. Instead, it gently invites you to explore. That approach has made it one of the most recommended distributions for Windows switchers, especially during controversial Windows updates, hardware restrictions, and privacy debates. But now, instead of simply being the comfortable on-ramp to Linux, Zorin OS appears ready to define expectations for what a modern Linux desktop should be. The line in the sand isn't about abandoning users. It's about focus. Over the past few years, Linux distributions have wrestled with identity. Should they chase power users with bleeding-edge packages? Should they prioritize stability above all else? Should they reinvent the desktop metaphor entirely? Zorin OS seems to be saying that the desktop Linux future depends on clarity, on consistency, on polish, on user experience that doesn't feel like a hobby project but like a serious competitor to Windows and Mac OS. And that means tough choices, streamlining features, reducing clutter, prioritizing long-term support, possibly even narrowing hardware targets to guarantee performance and reliability. For Linux users, especially those who value total freedom and infinite customization, that can feel uncomfortable. Linux has always been about choice. Hundreds of distributions, dozens of desktop environments, multiple package formats, different philosophies, but with that freedom comes fragmentation. New users get confused, app developers hesitate, hardware vendors stay cautious. Zorin OS drawing a line suggests that maybe it's time to trade a little chaos for cohesion. Maybe the future isn't about infinite variation, but about dependable excellence. The clock is ticking because the wider tech landscape isn't standing still. Windows continues evolving with cloud integration, AI features, and tighter hardware requirements. Mac OS refines its ecosystem with seamless device integration. Chrome OS expands into enterprise and education. In this environment, Linux can't rely solely on ideology or nostalgia. It needs a clear value proposition. Zorin OS appears determined to provide one. Privacy-respecting, user-friendly, stable, and modern, without compromise. Part of this shift involves how software is delivered. The Linux world has long debated package formats like DEB, RPM, Snap, and Flatpak. For users, this often translates into confusion. Why does one app install differently than another? Why are there multiple software stores? Why do some apps feel perfectly integrated, while others feel isolated? Zorin OS, embracing a more unified approach, leaning into curated software experiences, suggests that fragmentation may be giving way to intentional design. That's a big deal. It tells developers that there's a predictable environment to build for. It tells users that what they install will behave consistently. There's also the hardware question. Linux historically prided itself on running everywhere, from ancient laptops to cutting-edge rigs. But maintaining universal compatibility is resource-intensive. Zorin OS, focusing on optimized experiences for modern hardware, sends a subtle but powerful signal. The goal isn't just to run. The goal is to run beautifully. Smooth animations, reliable drivers, stable suspend and resume, predictable performance. That shift from "it works" to "it feels great" marks a maturation moment. And then there's the human factor. For years, Linux users have endured small annoyances in exchange for freedom. Minor driver hiccups, occasional app quirks, slightly inconsistent UI themes. Zorin OS seems to be saying that Linux doesn't have to demand that trade-off anymore. It can be polished. It can be elegant. It can be mainstream ready. But achieving that means setting standards. and standards inevitably exclude something. Old workflows, outdated technologies, experimental features that don't align with the broader vision. Some longtime Linux enthusiasts might see this as dilution, as catering too much to former Windows users, as smoothing edges that gave Linux its character, but others see it as survival. If Linux remains a patchwork of loosely connected projects, it risks staying perpetually niche on the desktop. Zorin OS drawing boundaries could encourage other distributions to sharpen their own identities, to collaborate more closely, to prioritize user experience over ideological purity. The timing amplifies the urgency. With increasing concerns about privacy, telemetry, subscription software models, and AI-driven data collection, many users are re-evaluating their relationship with technology. Linux has always promised control and transparency. Zorin OS packages that promise in a form that feels accessible, but accessibility requires trust, and trust requires consistency. You can't ask millions of Windows users to switch if the experience feels unpredictable. By defining what it stands for and what it won't compromise on, Zorin OS strengthens that trust. Another layer to this story is community expectation. When Linux users adopt a distribution, they become part of its ecosystem. They contribute feedback, bug reports, themes, scripts, tutorials. A clear direction from Zorin OS helps that community align its efforts. Instead of scattered experimentation, energy can focus on refinement. Documentation improves. Third-party tools integrate more cleanly. Support becomes easier because everyone shares the same assumptions. There's also a business dimension. While Linux itself is open source, sustainability matters. Zorin OS offers paid editions with additional features and support. Drawing a line in the sand may also signal a stronger commitment to a sustainable model. Clear differentiation between free and paid offerings, predictable release cycles, and focused development priorities create stability. And stability attracts both users and contributors. The phrase, "the clock is ticking," doesn't mean Linux is in danger of disappearing. It means opportunity windows don't stay open forever. Every time a major Windows update frustrates users, every time hardware requirements exclude older machines, every time privacy concerns trend online, there's a spike in interest in Linux. But interest alone isn't enough. If newcomers try Linux and encounter friction, they return to what they know. Zorin OS seems determined to ensure that when those moments happen, Linux feels ready. Imagine a user in 2026 with a perfectly functional PC that can't officially upgrade to the latest Windows version. They're told to buy new hardware. Instead, they download Zorin OS. Installation is smooth. Wi-Fi works instantly. The interface feels familiar. Their documents open without issue. Their favorite browser syncs seamlessly. Their printer is detected. That user doesn't care about kernel versions or init systems. They care about whether their computer works. Zorin OS drawing a line means optimizing relentlessly for that scenario. This doesn't eliminate the broader diversity of Linux. Arch will still be Arch. Fedora will still push innovation. Debian will still champion stability. But Zorin OS carving out a strong, clearly defined identity contributes to a healthier ecosystem. Not every distribution needs to be everything to everyone. Some can focus on experimentation, others on enterprise. Zorin focuses on approachable desktop excellence. For content creators, tech reviewers, and YouTubers who discuss Linux, this moment is significant. Clear narratives attract attention. Linux is complicated but powerful, is harder to communicate than, "Here is a polished alternative that respects your privacy and just works." Zorin OS provides that story. And stories drive adoption. There will be debates about Snap versus Flatpak, about default themes, about release schedules, about whether certain legacy features should be retired. That's natural in open source communities. But debate around a defined direction is more productive than aimless disagreement. When a project articulates its vision clearly, contributors can either support it, fork it, or build alternatives. That's the beauty of open source. Drawing a line doesn't remove freedom. It clarifies choices. In many ways, Zorin OS is challenging Linux users to think bigger. To stop seeing the desktop as a side experiment and start seeing it as a serious contender. That mindset shift influences everything from bug prioritization to marketing language. It influences how welcoming the community feels. It influences whether businesses consider deploying Linux desktops at scale. The ticking clock also reflects generational change. Younger users who grow up on smartphones and tablets expect intuitive interfaces. They don't have patience for configuration files and terminal commands just to adjust basic settings. Zorin OS leans into graphical tools, sensible defaults, and thoughtful design. That doesn't remove the power of Linux. It simply hides complexity until it's needed. Power users can still dive deep. Beginners can stay comfortable. And then there's the emotional aspect. Many Linux users carry a sense of identity tied to resisting corporate control. Zorin OS doesn't abandon that ethos, but it reframes it. Instead of rebellion for its own sake, it emphasizes empowerment through usability. You don't switch because you're angry. You switch because the alternative is genuinely better for you. So what does this mean for Linux users today? It means paying attention. It means recognizing that the ecosystem is evolving. It means acknowledging that polish and focus aren't betrayals of open source values but expressions of maturity. It means understanding that if Linux wants to capture the desktop spotlight during the next wave of tech upheaval, it must feel cohesive. Zorin OS drawing a line in the sand is less about exclusion and more about intention. It's a declaration that the project knows what it wants to be. And when a distribution knows its identity, users can decide if that identity aligns with their needs. Some will prefer ultra-minimal setups. Others will crave bleeding-edge packages. But many will appreciate a stable, elegant, privacy-respecting system that doesn't demand constant tweaking. The clock is ticking because expectations are rising. Because hardware cycles are shortening. Because the AI integration is accelerating. Because subscription fatigue is real. Because users are tired of being data points. Linux has the philosophical foundation to answer those concerns. Zorin OS is trying to provide the practical implementation. In the end, this moment isn't about one distribution dominating the Linux landscape. It's about signaling confidence. It's about showing that Linux on the desktop can be decisive, focused, and bold. Drawing a line in the sand says, this is who we are. This is what we prioritize. This is the experience we promise. And if that promise is delivered consistently, the next time millions of users look for an escape hatch from restrictive ecosystems, Linux won't just be an option whispered in forums. It will be a ready, polished destination. For Linux users watching this unfold, the message is simple but profound. The future won't be shaped by endless tinkering alone. It will be shaped by clarity, consistency, and courage to define boundaries. Zorin OS has taken that step. Whether others follow and whether users rally behind that vision will determine how loud the Linux desktop story becomes in the years ahead.